He was already running late when he saw him, an old man in a faded military cap, lost and limping through the chaos of Denver International. Jason Miller had 30 minutes to catch his flight home, 30 minutes to keep the promise he'd made to his 10-year-old son about being there for the championship game. But something about that veteran's eyes, the way they searched the crowd like he was invisible to everyone else, made Jason stop dead in his tracks. What happened next would turn a simple act of kindness into the most extraordinary day of his life. Because sometimes, when you help someone carry their burden, the universe finds a way to carry yours right back. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, have you ever helped a stranger and felt like the world shifted around you? Let's find out what really happened that morning. The thing about Denver International Airport at 7 in the morning is that it smells like every airport you've ever been in. But worse. Burnt coffee mixed with that artificial vanilla they pump through the air vents, plus something else. Maybe anxiety, maybe just too many people breathing the same recycled air. Jason Miller pushed through the crowd with his duffel bag banging against his hip, checking his phone for the third time in 2 minutes. 7:25 a.m. Flight leaves at 7:55. Boarding probably starting any minute now. 30 minutes. That's all he had. He'd been in Phoenix for 3 days, helping his buddy Mark move into a new apartment. And honestly, he was ready to be home. Ready to see his son Aiden's face light up when they called his name at the awards ceremony. The kid had been talking about it for weeks. How he might get MVP, how all the parents would be there, how his dad promised he'd be in the bleachers cheering the loudest. Jason had made that promise looking into his son's eyes, and he wasn't the kind of man who broke promises. Not to Aiden. Not ever. At 38, Jason still moved like the firefighter he was. Alert, purposeful, like he was always scanning for smoke or checking exits out of habit. Even in civilian clothes, just jeans and his old navy jacket with the slightly frayed cuffs, there was something about him that made people step aside without really knowing why. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, or maybe it was just that he looked like someone who knew what he was doing, which in airports was apparently rare enough to be noticeable. He passed the overpriced sandwich place where a turkey club cost $14, past the newsstand selling magazines no one actually read anymore, past the duty-free shop that always made him wonder who exactly was buying perfume at 7 in the morning. Gate B11 was still a good walk away, but he'd make it. He always made it. That was the thing about being a first responder. You learned to work with impossible timelines and somehow pull it off. That's when he saw him. At first, Jason almost didn't stop, almost kept walking. The old man was just another figure in the endless stream of travelers, another person with their own schedule and their own problems. But something made Jason look twice. Maybe it was the way the man was standing. Not quite. Steady, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he couldn't get comfortable. Maybe it was the cap he wore, faded army green with a patch Jason recognized from his grandfather's closet. Vietnam, the real deal, not some knockoff from a surplus store. The man was standing in front of the departure screens, holding a boarding pass in hands that trembled just slightly. Not shaking exactly, but that subtle unsteadiness that comes with age, with cold, with stress. His eyes, pale blue, watery behind wire-rimmed glasses that had seen better decades, kept darting between the screen and the paper in his hands, then back again like he was trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing its pieces. Jason slowed down. The logical part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through 15 years of running into burning buildings, was very clear about what he should do. Keep walking, make his flight, keep his promise to his son. Simple math, one person's confusion versus one 10-year-old's dreams. Easy choice. But then the old man looked up, and their eyes met for just a second. And Jason saw something there that hit him like a punch to the chest. Not just confusion, not just frustration, something deeper, The look of a man who had spent a lifetime being useful, being needed, being the one who solved problems instead of creating them. And now he was lost in a place designed to confuse people half his age, feeling invisible in a crowd of strangers, who all had somewhere more important to be. Jason's grandfather had looked like that near the end. Same lost expression when the Alzheimer's started taking pieces of him away. Same proud shoulders trying to hold up under the weight of feeling like a burden. "Shit," Jason muttered under his breath, then immediately felt bad for swearing with. The old man right there. He checked his phone again. 7:27. He took a step toward the gate, then stopped. Took another step, then stopped again. Inside his head, two voices were having an argument. One sounded a lot like Mark, practical and unsentimental. "Jason, you've got a flight to catch. You've got a promise to keep. This isn't your problem." The other voice was quieter, but it was the one that had gotten him into firefighting in the first place. "When did you become the kind of person who walks away?" Jason closed his eyes for half a second, then walked over to the old man. "Excuse me, sir," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You need a hand with something?" The man looked up, startled, like he wasn't used to people noticing him anymore. For a moment his face just went blank, and Jason wondered if maybe he'd made a mistake. But then something shifted in the old man's expression. Relief, maybe, or just surprise that someone had stopped. "Oh," the man said, his voice carrying the faint rasp of age and too many cigarettes. "Oh, thank you. I'm afraid I'm a bit turned around here. These gates, they keep moving, don't they?" He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "At least they seem to." Jason felt something loosen in his chest. "They sure do. Where are you trying to get to?" The man fumbled with his boarding pass, turning it over in his hands like it might have different information on the back. "Washington, D.C., he said. "Flight leaves at—" He squinted at the paper. 8:10, gate C-24, but I swear I was just looking at the board, and it said C-24 was that way. He pointed vaguely toward the right. "And now it says it's that way." He pointed left. "I'm starting to think I'm losing my mind." Jason looked at the departure board, then at the man's ticket. The flight number was right there, clear as day. And yeah, gate C-24 was definitely in the C concourse, which was back the way Jason had come, and then some. A good 10-minute walk for someone who moved fast. Probably 15 or 20 for someone. With the careful, measured gait, he could already see this man favoring. "No, you're not losing your mind," Jason said, and he meant it. Denver International is basically designed to confuse people. It's like they hired someone whose only job was to make sure nobody could find anything. That got a small smile from the old man. "I'm Jason, by the way." "Walter," the man said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, surprisingly firm. But Jason could feel the slight tremor in his fingers, the swollen knuckles that spoke of arthritis and old injuries. "Walter Harris." "Nice to meet you, Walter. Let me guess, you served?" Jason nodded toward the patch on Walter's cap. Walter's eyes brightened just a little. "Long time ago. Different world then." He paused, studying Jason's face. "You?" "My grandfather was Navy. Korea." Jason didn't mention that his grandfather had also spent the last 5 years of his life getting lost in his own neighborhood, or that Jason had been the one to find him one winter morning, confused and shivering in his pajamas 3 blocks from home. Some things you didn't talk about with strangers. Different wars, same, well, you know. "Yeah," Walter said quietly. "I know." They stood there for a moment, 2 men separated by decades, but connected by something neither of them had to explain. Jason checked his phone without meaning to. 7:29. His flight would start boarding any minute, and C-24 was a trek. If he was going to make this work, "Come on," Jason said, making the decision before he could talk himself out of it. "Let's get you to your gate." Walter hesitated. "I don't want to make you late for anything. You look like you've got somewhere to be." Jason thought about Aiden, about the promise, about the look on his son's face if he wasn't there. But he also thought about Walter, standing alone in this maze of a terminal, maybe missing his flight, maybe spending the night sleeping in uncomfortable chairs because the next flight wasn't until tomorrow. "I've got time," Jason lied smoothly. "Besides, C-24 is sort of on my way." It wasn't, but Walter didn't need to know that. They started walking, Jason automatically matching his pace to Walter's careful steps. The old man moved like someone who had learned to be cautious about sudden movements, favoring his right leg in a way that spoke of old injuries that never quite healed right. Every few steps, Jason caught him wincing slightly, though Walter tried to hide it. "You been to DC before?" Jason asked, partly to make conversation, and partly to distract himself from the steady countdown in his head. 7:31, 7:32. "Oh, a few times over the years," Walter said. "This is, well, it's a reunion, my old unit. We try to get together every a couple of years while we still can." His voice got softer. "Not as many of us left as there used to be." Jason felt his throat tighten. He'd been to enough firefighter funerals to know what Walter meant. Time had a way of thinning the ranks, and the older you got, the more aware you became of the empty chairs. "That's good, though," Jason said, "that you still get together, that you stay in touch." Walter nodded, but there was something sad in his expression. "Some years it's harder than others. This year I almost didn't come. Travel's gotten more complicated and He gestured vaguely at his leg. "Well, I'm not as spry as I used to be. But Harold, he's organizing this one. He called me last week and said it might be the last big gathering. A lot of the boys are in assisted living now, or worse, so I figured I'd better make the effort." They had reached the moving walkway that would take them toward the sea gates. Jason helped Walter step onto the belt, noting how the old man gripped the handrail tighter than strictly necessary. The terminal spread out around them, endless corridors of shops and restaurants and gates, thousands of people all moving with purpose Jason couldn't fathom. "I was 19 when I shipped out," Walter said suddenly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the walkway. "Thought I knew everything. Thought I was invincible." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Came back 21 and about 100 years older. That ever happened to you?" Jason thought about his first major fire, a 3-story apartment building with a family trapped on the top floor. He'd been 24, fresh out of training, absolutely certain he could save everyone. He had saved them, eventually, but not. Before spending 40 minutes thinking he was going to watch a 4-year-old girl die in his arms because he couldn't get to her fast enough. "Yeah," Jason said quietly. "Something like that." The walkway ended, and they stepped off into another corridor. Jason could see the signs for the sea gates ahead, but they still had a ways to go. 7:35. His stomach was starting to twist itself into knots, but Walter was moving as fast as he could, and rushing him wouldn't help anyone. "You got kids?" Walter asked. "One, a son, Aiden, he's 10. Jason felt his chest warm up the way it always did when he talked about Aiden. "He's got this baseball game today." "Well, not a game exactly, more like an awards ceremony. They're giving out trophies to the kids, and he might get MVP. "Might?" Jason grinned despite his growing anxiety. "Okay, probably will. Kid's got a hell of an arm for a 10-year-old. But don't tell him I said that. I don't want him getting cocky." Walter smiled, the first genuine smile Jason had seen from him. "Sounds like a good kid. He's lucky to have a dad who shows up." Something in Walter's voice made Jason look at him more closely. There was a weight there, a story behind the words that Walter wasn't telling. Jason wondered if Walter had kids of his own, if there had been games and ceremonies and moments that got missed because of deployments or distance, or just the complicated business of being human. "Yeah, well," Jason said, "that's the job, right? Showing up. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, weaving around other travelers, dodging rolling suitcases and strollers, and the occasional businessman who seemed to think everyone else should get out of his way. Jason found himself automatically steering Walter away from the worst of the crowds, creating small pockets of space where the old man could move without getting jostled. "There," Jason said finally, pointing ahead to where the sea gates branched. Off from the main corridor, C-24 should be just down that way, but when they reached the sign, Walter stopped walking and frowned at his boarding pass again. "That's odd," he said. "This says C-24, but—" He looked up at the monitor displaying gate information. "According to this, my flight is at D-16 now." Jason felt his heart sink. D-16 was back the other way, past where they'd started, in a completely different terminal section. He checked his phone again, 7:38, and tried to calculate. If they turned around now and walked fast, he might still make his flight. Might. "Gate changes," he said, keeping his voice light. "Happens all the time. Come on, we'll figure it out." But as they turned around and started back the way they'd come, Jason could see Walter struggling more with each step. The old man's face was getting pale, and he was gripping Jason's arm more tightly now, using it for balance in a way that made Jason realize just how much this walk was costing him. They made it halfway back to the main terminal before Walter had to stop, leaning against a pillar and breathing harder than he should have been. Jason looked around and spotted an airline employee, a young woman with a clipboard and a harried expression. "Excuse me?" Jason called to her. "We're looking for gate D-16, flight to Washington, D.C. That was supposed to be at C-24. The woman barely looked up from her clipboard. "Oh yeah, they moved that one again. Actually, it's at B-15 now. Equipment change." She pointed vaguely back toward where they'd originally started. "You'll want to take the train to the B concourse, then walk down to the low-numbered gates." Jason felt something cold settle in his stomach. B-15 wasn't just far. It was in a completely different part of the airport, accessible only by the underground train system. Even if they left right now, even if Walter could move faster than he was currently moving, it would take at least 20 minutes. 40. His flight was boarding. Right now, passengers were probably lining up, scanning their boarding passes, finding their seats. In 15 minutes, the doors would close, and the plane would push back from the gate, carrying an empty seat where Jason was supposed to be sitting. Jason looked at Walter, who was still catching his breath, completely unaware that Jason was having a minor crisis. The old man was studying the departure board again, squinting at the small print, trying to make sense of the constantly changing information. "Is it always like this?" Walter asked. "The gates changing, I mean?" "More than it should be," Jason said. He was still doing math in his head, still trying to figure out if there was any possible way to get Walter to his gate and then sprint back to make his own flight. But the numbers weren't working. There was no scenario where both of them got where they needed to go. "Come on," Jason said finally. "Let's get you to that train." The underground train system at Denver International was one of those features that looked impressive in photographs, but was actually kind of a nightmare in practice. The cars were crowded, the stops were confusing, and the whole thing moved with the kind of mechanical certainty that didn't account for elderly passengers who needed a little extra time to figure out where they were going. Jason helped Walter onto the train car, finding him a seat near the door and standing beside him. As the car jerked into motion, through the small windows, the underground tunnel flickered past in a blur of concrete and fluorescent lights. 43. Jason's phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Dude, where are you? I'm already at the school, and they're setting up the trophies." "You better not miss this." Jason stared at the text for a moment, then put his phone away without responding. What was he supposed to say? that he was currently on an underground train, helping a Vietnam veteran navigate an airport that seemed designed by people who hated both elderly passengers and common sense. "You're missing something, aren't you?" Walter said suddenly. Jason looked down at him, surprised. "What?" "Whatever you keep checking your phone for. You're missing something important." Walter's pale blue eyes were sharper than they'd seen before, more knowing. "You don't have to stay with me, son. I'll figure it out." For a moment, Jason considered it. Walter was right. He could leave now, sprint back to B11, maybe still make his flight if he ran fast enough and got lucky with security lines and gate agents who were feeling generous. He could still keep his promise to Aiden. He could still be the dad who showed up. But then he looked at Walter, really looked at him, saw the way his hands shook just slightly as he gripped the seat handle, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the careful way he was breathing, like each breath took more effort than it should, saw a man who had served his country and now found himself alone in a maze of moving walkways and gate changes, invisible to almost everyone around him. "I'm not going anywhere," Jason said. "We're going to get you to your flight." Walter studied, his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said quietly. That means more than you know." The train pulled into the B concourse station with a mechanical ding that echoed off the tile walls. Jason helped Walter off the train, and they emerged into another terminal corridor, this one somehow even more crowded than the last. B15 was at the far end of the concourse, which meant another long walk, more navigation around crowds, more time that Jason didn't have. 46. His flight was definitely boarding now. Passengers were definitely finding their seats, stowing their carry-on bags, settling in for the flight to Phoenix. The gate agent was probably making announcements about boarding zones and overhead bin space. In 9 minutes, they would start, looking for passengers who hadn't shown up yet, but Jason didn't run. He matched his pace to Walter's careful steps, helped him navigate around a group of college kids sprawled on the floor with their backpacks and textbooks, guided him past a business traveler who was arguing loudly into his phone about missed connections and important meetings. "There," Jason said finally, pointing ahead to gate B15. "That's you." But when they reached the gate, there was no crowd of passengers waiting to board. The seating area was mostly empty, and the departure board showed a message that made Jason's heart sink. Delayed. New departure time. 9:30 a.m. Walter stared at the board for a moment, then laughed. Actually laughed, a sound that was part relief and part exhaustion. "Well," he said, "I guess that settles that." 2-hour delay, Jason said, reading the fine print on the screen. "Mechanical issues." "Story of my life lately," Walter said, settling into one of the uncomfortable chairs near the gate. "Nothing ever goes according to plan anymore." Jason checked his phone. 7:48. If he left now, if he ran, he could probably still make his flight. The timing would be tight. But it was possible. Aiden would get his MVP trophy, and his dad would be there to see it, just like he'd promised. But looking at Walter sitting alone in the empty gate area, surrounded by strangers who weren't even traveling to the same destination anymore, Jason couldn't make himself move. "You know what?" Jason said, sitting down in the chair next to Walter. "I think I'll wait with you for a bit." Walter looked at him with surprise. "You don't need to do that. I'll be fine." "I know you will be, but..." Jason shrugged. "Sometimes. Airports are better when you're not alone." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the airport move around them. People rushing to gates, people sleeping in chairs, people arguing with airline employees about cancellations and delays, and all the small catastrophes that seem to multiply inside airports like bacteria in a petri dish. "You're going to miss your flight," Walter said, finally. Jason looked at his phone. 7:52. "Yeah," he said. "I probably am." "What was it for? The thing you're missing?" Jason told him about Aiden, about the MVP trophy, about the promise he'd made and was now going to break. He told him about how excited his son had been, how Aiden had been talking about it for weeks, how this was supposed to be one of those perfect father-son moments that kids remember forever. Walter listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. "How old did you say he was?" Walter asked when Jason finished. 10. 10. Walter was quiet for a moment. "I had a son once. Well, I still have a son, but—" He trailed off, staring at his hands. "We don't talk much anymore. Haven't for years. I missed a lot of games when he was that age. Work, deployment, just life getting in the way. Always thought there would be time to make it up later." Jason felt his stomach twist. What happened? Nothing dramatic, no big fight, no falling out, just distance, time. He grew up, moved away, started his own family. I kept thinking I'd call, that we'd reconnect, but somehow the years just kept passing. Walter looked up at Jason. "He's got kids of his own now, my grandchildren. I've never met them." The weight of that settled between them, like a stone dropped in still water. Jason thought about Aiden, about all the games and ceremonies and small moments that made up a childhood. He thought about how quickly kids grew up, how fast those opportunities disappeared. "It's not too late," Jason said. "To call him, I mean." Walter smiled sadly. "Maybe, but right now there's a 10-year-old boy waiting for his dad to show up, and you're sitting here with me instead." He reached over and patted Jason's arm. "That's kindness, son. Real kindness. But it's also foolishness." Jason's phone rang, Aiden's name on the screen. He looked at Walter, who nodded toward the phone. "Answer it." "Hey, buddy," Jason said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Dad." Aiden's voice was small, uncertain. "Where are you? Coach says they're starting the ceremony in 10 minutes, and I can't see you anywhere." Jason closed his eyes. In the background, he could hear the echoes of the gymnasium, the chatter of parents and kids, the shuffle of folding chairs. Being arranged. He could picture it perfectly. The bright lights, the polished floor, his son standing with his team, eyes scanning the bleachers for the one face that mattered most. Jason started, then stopped. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that sometimes life forces you to choose between two important things? How do you tell your son that you're breaking a promise, even if it's for a good reason? Walter was watching him, and suddenly the old man reached out and took the phone from Jason's hand. "Hello," Walter said, his voice gentle but clear. "Is this Aiden?" Jason could hear his son's confused voice through the speaker, but couldn't make out the words. "This is Walter," the old man continued. "I'm a friend of your dad's. He's here with me right now, and I need to tell you something very important about your father." For the next 2 minutes, Walter told Aiden about what Jason had done that morning, about how he'd stopped to help a confused old veteran find his gate, even though he was in a hurry, about how he'd walked Walter all over the airport, through gate changes and delays, making sure he wasn't alone, about how Jason had missed his own flight because he was too decent to leave someone who needed help. "Your dad is a hero," Walter said finally. "Not the kind that gets their picture in the paper, but the real kind, the kind that helps people when nobody's watching, just because it's the right thing to do. And I want you to know that even though he's not there with you right now, he's exactly where he needs to be." Walter handed the phone back to Jason, whose throat was too tight for words. "Dad." Aiden's voice was different now, softer, but somehow more mature. "Is that true? Did you really miss your flight to help him?" "Yeah, buddy," Jason managed. "I did." "That's—" Aiden was quiet for a moment. "That's what heroes do, isn't it? Help people who need help?" Jason felt tears sting his eyes. "Yeah, that's what heroes do." "Then I'm proud of you, Dad. I'm really, really proud of you." The ceremony was starting in the background. Jason could hear the announcer calling names, could hear the applause as trophies were handed out. Soon they would call Aiden's name, and his son would walk up to receive his award without his father. "And there to see it. I'm sorry I'm not there, buddy," Jason said. "It's okay, Dad, really. Walter's right. You're exactly where you need to be." After Jason hung up, he and Walter sat in silence for a while. The gate area was filling up now with passengers for the delayed flight. People settling in for the long wait with books and laptops and the resigned patience of experienced travelers. "Smart kid," Walter said finally. "Yeah, he is. Gets that from his dad, I imagine." Jason was about to respond when he noticed a commotion near the gate counter. An airline employee in a crisp uniform, not just a gate agent, but someone with stripes on his sleeves that suggested management, was talking rapidly to the woman behind the desk. They both kept looking in his and Walter's direction. "Mr. Miller?" The man in uniform was walking toward them now, and Jason felt a moment of confusion. How did this guy know his name? "That's me," Jason said, standing up. "Sir, I'm Captain David Ross." The man extended his hand, and Jason noticed the pilot's wings pinned to his shirt. "I understand you missed your flight to Phoenix this morning?" Jason nodded, bewildered. "Yes, sir, but how did you—" "Word travels fast in this business," Captain Ross said with a small smile, "especially when it's a story worth telling. I heard what you did for Mr. Harris here." He nodded toward Walter, who was watching the exchange with obvious confusion. "My father served with Walter in Vietnam, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. He used to tell me stories about Walter Harris, how he saved my dad's life during the Tet Offensive." Walter's eyes widened. "Ross? David Ross Sr. Big guy, red hair, always talking about his kid back home." "That's him," Captain Ross said, his voice warm. "He passed away 5 years ago, but he never stopped talking about you. About how you dragged him to safety when he took shrapnel in his leg, stayed with him for 6 hours while they waited for a medevac." The captain's voice got quieter. "He said you probably saved a dozen men that day, but you never talked about it, never claimed credit." Walter was staring at the captain like he was seeing a ghost. "Little Davy, but you were just a baby in the pictures he showed us. Not so little anymore," Captain Ross said with a grin. "And I've been flying for 23 years now, thanks to the inspiration of a certain Marine who kept my dad alive long enough to come home and raise his son." Jason watched this reunion unfold with growing amazement. The two men were shaking hands, then embracing, and Walter was wiping tears from his eyes as Captain Ross told him about his father's life, about the grandchildren Walter had helped make possible, about the family legacy that existed because of a split-second decision made in a jungle halfway around the world 50 years ago. "Mr. Miller," Captain Ross said, turning back to Jason, "I want to do something for you. For both of you. Actually," he gestured toward the gate, "I'm flying to Phoenix in about an hour. Different airline, but I pulled some strings. There are 2 first-class seats with your names on them." Jason blinked. What?" "You missed your flight helping my father's friend," Captain Ross said, simply. "The least I can do is make sure you get to where you need to go." He paused. "Where exactly did you need to go in Phoenix?" "Flagstaff, actually. My son's baseball ceremony." Captain Ross checked his watch. "What time does it start?" "It was supposed to start at 9, but—" Jason thought about the phone call with Aiden, about the award ceremony that was probably finishing up right now. "I think I missed it." "Maybe not," Captain Ross said. "Phoenix to Flagstaff is about 2.5 hours by car. If we leave in the next hour, and if you don't mind a slightly unconventional approach to getting home," he grinned, "let's just say I have some friends who owe me favors." 2 hours later, Jason found himself in the co-pilot seat of a small, chartered plane, watching the Arizona landscape spread out below them. Walter was in the seat behind him, chatting with Captain Ross about mutual friends and shared memories, filling in gaps in stories that had been passed down through families. For decades, the plane touched down at a small airstrip just outside Flagstaff, where a helicopter was waiting. "You've got to be kidding me," Jason said, staring at the aircraft. Sometimes, Captain Ross said, the universe lines up just right to remind us that kindness matters. He clapped Jason on the shoulder. The pilot's another friend of mine. He'll have you at your son's school in 15 minutes. The helicopter ride was surreal, flying low over the Arizona mountains, the landscape rushing by in a blur of red rock and pine trees. Jason kept expecting to wake up, for this to turn out to be some elaborate stress dream brought on by missing his flight. But then the school came into view below them, and he could see the baseball field, where a ceremony was clearly still in progress. The helicopter touched down in the parking lot, drawing stares and pointing fingers from parents who had definitely not expected their Tuesday morning to include aircraft landings at the elementary school. Jason jumped out, ducking under the rotor wash, and ran toward the field. He could see Aiden standing with his team, trophy in hand, looking around with wide eyes at the helicopter that had just landed, when the boy spotted his father running. Across the parking lot, his face lit up with a smile so bright it could have powered the entire school. "Dad!" Aiden broke from the line and ran toward him, trophy held high. "You made it! You really made it!" Jason caught his son in a hug that lifted him off the ground, the weight of the morning finally settling into something that felt like joy. Around them, parents and kids were gathering, all talking at once about the helicopter and the man who had just sprinted across the parking lot like his life depended on it. "I thought you missed it," Aiden said, his voice muffled against Jason's shoulder. "I thought so too," Jason said, "but it turns out the world is full of surprises." Later, after the ceremony had finished, and the other parents had stopped asking questions about the helicopter, Jason found himself sitting in the bleachers with Aiden, watching the maintenance crew clean up the field. Walter had stayed at the airport with Captain Ross. The two of them had apparently decided to extend their reunion over dinner and war stories. "Dad," Aiden said, turning his trophy over in his hands, "do you think you'll see Walter again?" Jason thought about it. "I hope so." "Me too. I want to thank him." "Thank him for what?" Aiden looked up at his father with eyes that seemed older than his 10 years. "For teaching me what a hero really looks like." That evening, Jason got a phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, Walter's voice was on the other end, calling from the airport in Washington, D.C. "I made it," Walter said simply. "The reunion was, well, it was everything I hoped it would be. Harold said to tell you that any friend of mine is welcome at the next one." "I'd like that," Jason said, meaning it. "There's something else," Walter said. "I called my son today. First time in 3 years. We're going to meet for lunch next week, and he wants me to meet my grandchildren." Walter's voice got thick. Funny how helping someone else can remind you what's important. After they hung up, Jason sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. Aiden was inside, doing homework, and occasionally calling out questions about math problems that seemed unnecessarily complicated for a 10-year-old. Jason thought about the morning, about all the small choices that had led to this moment. He thought about Walter's story, about Captain Ross and his father, about the invisible threads that connected all their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of Walter with a group of elderly men, all wearing military caps and smiling at the camera. Below it, a message: "The gang's all here. Thank you for making sure I didn't miss this." Jason smiled and put his phone away. Tomorrow, he would go back to work. Back to the routine of checking equipment and responding to calls and all the ordinary heroism of keeping a small town safe. But tonight, he sat on his porch and marveled at how much a single act of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he would probably never fully understand. Because sometimes, when you help someone carry their burden, the world finds a way to carry yours right back. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to keep both promises, the one you made to a stranger in an airport and the one you made to your son. Sometimes, The smallest choices lead to the biggest adventures, and the greatest rewards come, not from what you receive, but from what you're willing to give. In the distance, a train horn echoed across the valley, carrying its own cargo of dreams and destinations. Jason listened until the sound faded, then went inside to help his son with his math homework, carrying with him the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent and a promise well kept. If this story made you believe in the power of small acts of kindness, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just carry duffel bags and refuse to walk away when someone needs help. Drop a comment and tell us about a time when helping a stranger changed your day, your perspective, or your life. Because these stories matter, these moments matter, and sometimes sharing them is the kindest thing we can do.